So when I finished making what I thought was the end of this video, I thought of some more things to say on the subject of spirituality, etc. And then I stopped, and then I thought of some more things to say, and then I stopped, and I thought of some more things to say, and I stopped. So there'll be times in this video where you think it's ended, and I say it's the end, but then I'm like, oh, no, wait. I say feel free to subscribe, etc. But then I'm like, nope, got some more stuff to say. So those of you who want to watch it to the very end, feel free to do so. Those of you that want to turn it off at any point, feel free to fucking do so. Peace and love. Usually when people use the word agnostic, they're referring to an individual who simply doesn't know whether there is a God or not. When I use the term agnostic, I do kind of mean that, but I also mean that I believe in kind of spiritual things, but I'm not necessarily convinced by any of the major religions. I consider myself to be a spiritual agnostic. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that really is that I'm a very spiritual person, and I believe in lots of things that lots of people don't believe in. And there are different kinds of people who don't believe in these things that I believe in. There are some people who they actually consider themselves to be religious, Christians of any kind, like Catholics, or any sub categories of Protestantism and Presbyterianism, and Muslims, Jews, Hindus, and Sikhs. They consider themselves to be religious, yet they may not necessarily. So many people who follow those religions, may not necessarily believe in some of the things that I believe, which are spiritual. There are also people who consider themselves to be atheists, who throw the baby out with the bathwater, meaning that they take all elements of religion, like all of the religions I've just named, right, and say, oh, that's all crazy, fantastical, fictional bullshit, and it doesn't, and there is no God and all that, right? And therefore there can be no element of spirituality, right? We don't know anything. There's nothing after you die, and there's no higher being, and there's nothing that science can't explain. And they get very caught up in a logical, rational way of thinking. That kind of dismisses anything that they perceive to be woo-woo or hippie or crazy, and they think that anyone who is religious, they think anyone who believes in any kind of spirituality beyond what science can explain, in the way in which modern Western science, Newtonian science, has set up certain parameters of explaining life, anything outside of that box, and anyone who thinks outside that box is not very intelligent, is crazy, and whether or not they are religious, whether or not the anyone who the individual who thinks who believes in any kind of spirituality or things that are beyond the flesh and the physical, right? That many people consider to be crazy and hippy dippy and fantastical. They consider those people to be just as bad and as batshit crazy as the way they consider religious people, right? Me personally, I've gone through different stages in my life where I've been fairly religious in one respect growing up, but in other respects not very religious. I was raised Catholic, and then I've transitioned and became more of an agnostic who kind of was kind of indifferent to religion, but I didn't like certain elements of it. And then when I was about 20 years old, in 2011, 12, I went through a stage of being an extreme hardcore atheist, right? An extreme hardcore atheist who was very into people like Richard Dawkins, the late great Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, etc. And I still admire these men and some of the things they have to say with relation to religion in some respects. But I came to realize, like, a lot of atheists and a lot of, like I said before, a lot of people who mock religion and disagree with religion, they kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, and they don't believe in any kind of spirituality, and I think it's all nonsense, and that science is the way, and in this little box, and there's no grey area in between religion and atheism, and agnostics are just fence sitters who don't believe in, who just don't know whether there's a God or not. Now, like, I came to realize this way of thinking is almost like a fundamentalist religion in and of itself, because it's like they're like saying, we are sure there is no God. No, there's no kind of higher being. There's nothing that happens. There's no guiding force. People who think that they can be healed naturally by things are just as crazy and delusional as people maybe in the Bible or something who thought that certain things were the way they are. And a lot of people, atheists and religious fundamentalists, both take some of the things that are said in the Bible literally, when I think that they should take them more metaphorically. And they say, oh, how can there be this? How can there be the devil? It's ridiculous. And it's like, maybe there is a devil as an energy in the world, right? You don't need to take it so literally. You don't need to think of it like, oh, in the way the guy with the fucking horns and there's a place called hell underneath us. That's ridiculous, and there's no such thing as heaven. Like, you don't, and that when people heal people, there's no truth to that, or like, can't think of any specific other examples right now, but you get the gist of what I'm trying to say, right? That, like, I believe there's far more. I think I have far more in common, especially the person I am now, than when I was going through my hardcore atheist phase, with people who are religious, who may subscribe to and believe in a God that I don't necessarily believe in, that particular God of monotheistic faiths, but who are people who are spiritual, who I share certain spiritual beliefs with, even if those spiritual beliefs may look slightly different on the surface. You know, I went through, like I said, I went through that stage of thinking there are certain things about, of thinking there's nothing positive about religion at all, and only looking at focusing on the negative things about religion. Now, it should be said there are lots of awful negative things that have happened because of the patriarchal religions, right? Because of the Abrahamic religions, and because of Hinduism and Sikhism to a degree, although I don't know enough about Hinduism and Sikhism to really comment. But I can certainly say the three Abrahamic religions, right, there's been lots of awful things that have happened in the name of those religions, right? There's been lots of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse of men, women, and children. There's been shaming. There's been awful things, wars fought in the name of those religions. There's lots of control based around those religions. There's lots of fundamentalism, which causes a lot of things based on those religions. But that doesn't take away from the fact that there are certain positive things that people experience within all religions, right? There are lots of people that go to church, or as we Catholics, even though I don't really consider myself a Catholic really, but I was raised Catholic, so we Catholics called Mass, or Jews going to temple, or Muslims going to the mosque, right? I'm not too sure about Hinduism and Sikhism, but you get what I'm saying, right? These people, they go there, and many people find peace and community and spirituality and a sense of praying. Now, when I was a little boy and when I was a teenager, I wasn't religious in the way in which some religious people are religious. Like, I could kind of take and leave what I kind of wanted within Catholicism, right? And it just so happened to be that was the religion that I happened to be brought up with. But it's almost like that was just simply the vessel through which certain elements of spirituality that I had within me already, I feel, went through, were like manifest through, and I saw the world through that. Meaning, like, I used to quite enjoy going to church in some respects. I used to enjoy some of Jesus's teachings. I used to pray a lot, right? And I did think there was a God, but at the same time, I kind of thought it wasn't like, oh, there's definitely a God, and I think it's the horrible God that should shame me. Because my parents weren't those kind of Catholics. There are some people of all religions who are really, like, oppressive to their children, like, oh, you need to do this. Now, both my grandmothers were a bit like that. My dad's mum certainly was. My mum's mum was raised went to boarding school with nuns, right? In, I believe, the 50s, or maybe even the 40s. She's born in 1939, right? And then my mum's dad was Church of England. I don't know how religious they were, but it's not like my mum was brought up really religious, but, you know, her mum was fairly religious, and she was in a very oppressive form of Catholicism in terms of the way her relationship to Catholicism, the way that she learnt about Catholicism in a boarding school for girls, where, you know, a lot of that's about shame and guilt and all that shit. Oppressing female sexuality, shaming them, just, you know, abuse. I'm not just necessarily saying she suffered any sexual abuse, but physical abuse certainly, and emotional abuse, yes. And you know, like, there are lots of bad things about fucking religion, but as I'm talking specifically about Catholicism right now, that we all know about, right? All the disgusting shit that came out about priests and children and nuns and children that's been going on, right? There's lots of awful things. But like, anyway, it wasn't like me personally that even though I went to a Catholic school, I went to a Catholic primary school and a Catholic secondary school. It wasn't like religion, and my generation, it wasn't as bad anyway, because I'm born in 1991. It wasn't as bad as my parents' or grandparents' generation in terms of the strictness of Catholicism, right? But so my relationship to Catholicism wasn't necessarily a religion in general and God and all that. It wasn't like, I was never the guy that feared God in the way, or felt shame. I'd do whatever the fuck I wanted to do, right? But did I also pray? Yeah, I did. And then when I was like, and I thought, oh, there is something, and I realized, like, I just thought there was, right, for a while. And then maybe at like the age of, I don't know, 14, 15, I started to question things a bit more. But because I wasn't so invested in religion in the sense of I have to believe this, and I was really strict I wasn't strict on myself with religion in that sense. It wasn't like I was turning a massive corner, like, oh, I fucking hate this, and now I'm not like this, and I'm anti-religion. I wasn't. When I was like 16, I just turned 16. It was December. It was Christmas Day, 2007. And my granddad, my dad's dad, had died on the 10th of December 2007, right? So this is like 2 weeks later and a day, right? This is like 15 days after he's died. And I'm sitting in mass with my mum, my brother, my grandma, my aunties and uncles, and a few other people related through different elements of the family, through marriage or whatever, and we're all in mass. And it was the first time I really, and the priest was standing up there and speaking, and it was kind of like the first time, I just turned 16, I really was like, saw the kind of cult element of Catholicism, in terms of like everyone really experienced it, had a kind of an epiphany about, well, this is kind of weird, man. Is like when the priest would say things and everyone would repeat it back like trained robots, without, they learnt it when they were little kids, and they're probably not even thinking about the words that are coming out of their mouth. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And I was thinking, this is all bullshit. Who knows whether there's a God or not, but who gives a fuck, right? And that's what I kind of felt. And then for a few years, I wasn't really religious. I was kind of like, whatever, take it or leave it. But I didn't really go to mass anymore after the age of 14, 15 anyway. And I didn't really think too much about religion for a few years. And then when I was in my second year of university, and towards the end of 2011, beginning of 2012, I was like, yeah, like I said, that's when I started to watch YouTube videos of Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, and people like that, and really, really be extremely anti-religious in any sense, and kind of close my mind off to any elements of spirituality. But going back to the idea of me praying when I was younger, like, because it wasn't like a God-fearing kind of praying for things, it was like, it was kind of like, yeah, be thankful for things. And it was kind of like praying for things in a way that's like, not even for things, just like praying and kind of acknowledging that if I put out good energy into my mind and myself and to this higher being that I believe is exists, but I don't, like that kind of thing. Many atheists and people that aren't religious will mock traditionally religious people for doing that. And when I went through my hardcore atheist phase, I was like, I kind of like didn't I thought that was ridiculous, and how did I ever and thought to myself, how did I ever think that was crazy? But now, over the next, when I was 20 and since then, over the last 7 years, I've become more spiritual and have more of a connection to the person I was when I was going to church and when I was praying, even though I don't necessarily think of God or necessarily believe in God in the way I did then. It's kind of more like there's a higher being, almost in the same way that Russell Brand is spiritual and believes in God, right? And I think that doesn't matter. That's just a vessel. The traditional way of praying that many people mock is simply a vessel through which to connect with something higher and connect with yourself and connect with others almost. And it's almost like it doesn't matter. It just happened to be Catholicism and religion in that sense that I was doing that through. But it's kind of like even meditation now to me is almost a form of getting in touch with God and praying. And the idea of the law of attraction is, and I've got in the last few years got very interested in like Native American spirituality and things like that, and believing in things. And I've always kind of believed in certain things that would happen, and I've like that other people would say, oh, how can you know that? That's crazy. Things don't happen for a reason. Like, there is no higher being. There is no like no. I've always kind of believed in that throughout my life. Ironically, when I was 20 and I was going through my hardcore atheist phase, right, there was a guy who had not been brought up religiously at all, and I think because of that, he wasn't so vehemently against religion in the way that some people who are religious and then rebel against it are. Right? And obviously there are people who haven't been brought up with any kind of religion who are also against religion, like in a really way where they kind of mock it. Oh, anyone who believes in that's a fucking idiot. Ha ha. And they throw the spiritual baby out with the bathwater, as if there's no validity to certain elements of religion and spirituality. And he actually introduced me to the idea of like thinking things like that as a higher being, right? Smoked a fair amount of weed in my life over the last 7 years. That kind of connected me to like understanding higher things that certain people don't believe are true. One, because certain people have never tried weed and cannabis, and other people that have tried cannabis don't necessarily have a good experience on it in the first few times they do it. Sometimes that's just something to do with them internally. Sometimes it's just their body getting used to it, or it's not for them. Whatever, that's fine. That's fair enough. But that played a part in me understanding like certain higher things about myself and other people in the world. And what the message I'm basically trying to espouse here is like there are sometimes I found in my own experience anyway, and I can only speak from my own experience, I feel like there are certain things that in general that people close their mind off to, and one of them is spirituality and the idea that there is a higher being or a higher consciousness going on, and that we are in control of our own thoughts, and that maybe like thoughts and words have a profound effect on our lives and the lives of others around us and the world as a whole. and it's like easy to have black and white thinking and to put people in one box or another box, and put ideas in one box, another box, and say that you're either a religious nut who believes in like crazy spiritual shit like that, or some people actually, like I said before, do believe, go to church and all that, right? So just using the idea of Christians, right? But they don't even believe in certain other spiritual things, which is kind of an interesting like combination of human beings that fall into that box. I know some people like that. Whereas I'm like almost the opposite of that. I don't go to church, and I don't necessarily believe in some of the things that they might believe in, but I believe in other things that you'd think that religious people might be more open to, or be part of what they believe in, right? But I find that most people either want to be like a hardcore atheist, science, Newtonian, modern science, rationalist person who thinks there's nothing that science can't explain, and anyone who is left field, they're hippie, they're crazy, they're woo-woo, they're like the same as any religious fundamentalist, they're nutcases, whatever like derogatory term that people like to use about people that are in touch with spirituality or into any element of spirituality. And that there are, right, but the reality is you can have a well-rounded view of life, and oftentimes I feel like it has benefited me, and it will benefit other people to opening themselves up, even first of all just to the possibility in their mind of certain things being higher than the physical world, like certain elements of your own consciousness. Like I said a few moments ago, that the idea of like thinking about something and then that being a physical thing. And it's funny, it's ironic actually, science now is waking up more and more to the idea of the mental and emotional and spiritual being, even though they don't necessarily refer to it as spiritual, being related to physical, provable, tangible things, either positive, negative, or neutral. Meaning like there are definitely, scientists definitely are like realizing more and more, I feel like, the idea of the placebo effect being not just, oh, we give you some food and you think it's we give you some medicine that's like a sugar pill and you think it's the real medicine, so then your body heals. But that, yes, but that in an even broader sense of like, I'm pretty sure they've done tests where they tell people things that aren't true and the person starts to believe in them. Or they've done tests on athletes, right, who where they've told them to imagine that they're running or doing whatever their sport is, right, on track runners, and then they've like tested their muscles, and their muscles think they're running, right? There definitely is a link between our mind, our spirit, and our physical body. You know, people have healed from cancer and such other similar diseases, right? Through not through modern Western medicine, yes, partly through certain herbs and plants and foods, abstaining from certain foods and eating other foods, but also more than that, the way they think about the cancer and their mind, right? There's been scientific studies of like, not even necessarily scientific studies, but like there's been stories of people who, you know, have been in accidents at sea, right? There was one story, I can't remember the exact details, either it was a plane that crashed into the sea or it was a boat that crashed or whatever, but there were two groups of people, and one of them didn't believe that they could survive, right? So they didn't fucking survive, right? And because they were like, no, we've had it, we're going to die, right? And another group of people did believe they could survive, and they fucking survived. And a lot of the things that we think are not up to us are in our mind. And what I'm trying to say here is like, this is something I think people should be aware of. Like, we are God almost. Right? Lots of things are in our mind, and lots of the way we think creates our body, is related to our body, and the relate to things externally from us that we perceive to be external from us. And we've been indoctrinated to think are external from us. We can't even necessarily physically see them, that happen, right? And it's kind of like, here's an example, right? If you are looking at someone and you're thinking in your mind, oh, that person has bad intentions towards me, whether that's extreme or not, those intentions are extreme or not, like they want to physically harm me, or they're just like, you're just thinking, that person thinks I'm weird, or that person thinks I'm weird, and then you're going to start to see that in them. You're going to start to see that they are going to be looking weird. You're going to start to look at them weird. Then the energy that you're putting out that's now manifesting itself in your body, in the way you're reacting to them, they're not necessarily consciously thinking exactly what you're thinking. They're just getting a vibe from you. Right, through your body language and through the way you are. And sometimes even like, this is even more than just body language and them being able to physically look at that. Sometimes there'll be someone in another room or in your house who just has a vibe that you can't even put your finger on. Whether it's a family member, a loving relationship, in quotation marks, loving relationship, a friend, a boss, or another stranger, whoever, and it's not even necessarily their body language or the way they look. It's just something you feel. It's almost like a sixth sense that we have that we don't acknowledge, right? And that is what I'm talking about. There's like, sometimes people like to make out that isn't a real thing, right? And in doing so, they kind of close their mind down to certain things, and the way that they and the way that they could make things to happen. They close their mind down to the idea that they are in control of certain things, and at the same time, as we're talking about believing there's a higher power, sometimes there are things that are kind of, in quotation marks, in one paradigm, like out of our control, that are going on, that we're not even intelligent enough as human beings to understand are part of our whole life, and that are part of the bigger picture, the bigger plan. And oftentimes people, atheists, mock this when religious people say, oh, God has a plan for me. And I understand where they're coming from when they mock religious people, and some religious people could do things if they had the mindset I was just talking about and realize that they can control their destiny. That is one paradigm I agree with, that definitely has a massive element of truth to it. But I also think that the person that's mocking that religious person is missing the element of truth that is within what that person is saying, meaning that person is saying that there's a bigger plan. Because people think of God as a male, monotheistic, singular person in the sky that is controlling things in the way that we as humans think of controlling things, right? They kind of like close their mind down to the idea that actually God could be just a really complex kind of, I don't even want to say being, right? But for want of a better term, being, right? That has a bigger plan and we're all part of it, and that everything happens for a reason. And then some people will, what's the devil's advocate to that? Well, some people would say that, well, how can you say that? Because there's so many awful things, and why do I deserve to suffer? Why does this child or this animal or this human being deserve to suffer? They've been murdered. They've had something bad happen to them. And I absolutely understand that. I don't have the fucking answer for that. What I'm trying to say is, like, you don't know how that is playing a part in the universe. Something worse could have happened to you if that didn't happen. Maybe there's a lesson to learn from that. You know, and it's easy to say when you're not going through the thing, but, you know, I've had bad things happen to me that I didn't deserve in my life. But then I've also had other things that have happened to me that I probably, if I hadn't taken a certain path, I probably did deserve. And, you know, where does the line draw? Where do you draw the line? Now, I'm not stating any of these things as facts. And the reason I'm looking at all of these different perspectives is, one, because my mind is open to a variety of things, to all of the criticisms of religion, and also to, and the idea of spirituality and everything happening for a reason and all that. But also, it's kind of like, I see the other side, I see both sides, the people that look at these things and think, oh, this is crazy, and the people that look at these things, these spiritual things I'm talking about, and think, no, this is exactly it, God has a plan. And, you know, there is no right and wrong answer. No one has the answer, and no matter how much anyone is certain whether there is a God or there isn't a God, or things happen for a reason or they don't, or there's somewhere where you die, or you can control your destiny or you can't. It's like, I'm just trying to open people's minds up to the idea that there are lots of different paradigms that exist simultaneously, and that there are oftentimes things out there that are happening for a bigger purpose that we can't tell, that we can't understand necessarily, and just to be open and aware to that when you're going through hard times. And also people who want to fight so hard to think that there isn't any kind of higher being, recognize maybe there's a reason subconsciously that you get so defensive about it and want to fight so hard about it. And at the same time, people that are extremely religious and who want to not acknowledge that there's any bad things about religion at all, like maybe you should open your mind to. And sometimes some of those people might throw certain logic out the window that's like clearly logic, and try to like make things fit in their mind. You know, maybe they need to ask some questions and be a bit more logical and skeptical of certain things to do with religion. Both are true. And basically that's all I wanted to say in this video, just to like talk about the idea of spirituality, kind of a rant video, but, you know, like a lot of the videos I make with the Let You Be You Life Camp, because of my ADHD brain that goes off on tangents and shit. But hopefully you've all gained some kind of insight into the way that you think about things, and hopefully this has opened your minds to like different possibilities just to consider. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and feel free to subscribe. From me, Conor Canney, at the Let You Be You Life Camp. Peace and love. Take care, guys. Oh, another thing I forgot to say with relation to spirituality and believing in things beyond the physical that many people don't believe in. My best friend is can predict certain things and know when something's going to happen, particularly when people die, either people he knows or celebrities. And my mum has always been a bit witchy in that same regard. My mum's very like, you know, gets feelings about things. Something's going to happen. Something good's going to happen. Something bad's going to happen. Something's going to happen. I don't know whether it's going to be good or bad or neutral. I can feel it. And 80-90% of the time she can also feel the person, right, that is related to the thing that's going to happen. And I am a bit like that, to a lesser degree. I think I've inherited some of that from my mum. And I also know another woman who's like my great uncle's ex-wife, I think, or ex-partner at least, who is even more than my mum in some respects, like picks up vibes and predicts certain things. And this is what I mean. Like, some people think that's crazy. They think, especially hardcore atheists and people like that, they think, oh, that's bullshit. No way could someone think that. That's bullshit. That's all in your head. Yeah, or yeah, right, okay. Patronising or whatever. They're like, oh yeah, of course. You think you're God, do you? You think you're a fortune teller? You know what I mean? And it's like, they act as if that isn't a real thing. But the only reason they act like that is because that's the way they've been indoctrinated in Western culture. Right? To think that something like that's supernatural and you have to be scared of it. You know, in some respects, Native Americans, and not just Native Americans, but people around the world, used to almost consider women as goddesses. And they considered like female intuition almost sacred knowledge. Right? And then the patriarchs thought, you know, that's when they got scared of women. Right? And the only woman who was considered to have maybe what that woman, maybe something similar to what my mum's got, but probably not as mild as that in terms of like, oh, something's going to happen, but I don't know what it is, right? But like women who could maybe tell fortunes and stuff, it's like they used to consider those women witches and want to burn them and shit, right? In the medieval times. And but what I'm saying is, like I said earlier, I've always had this thing where I can kind of like think of certain things that I couldn't possibly think of in the way in which we're taught to think of logical things. Like, there's no way that you could predict that was going to happen, Conor, but I did fucking predict it. Right? There's no way that you could attract that thing into your life with your mind. Like, what? There's no way that your feeling about this was, you know, you foresaw this. Or there's no way your mum predicted this, or my best friend predicted these people dying, but he fucking did. It's not just them, like other people are like that as well. There are certain people that I feel like are more in harmony and in tune with certain things, you know. That's just something I wanted to add at the end there, because I totally forgot to mention that. And it's related to this subject. You know, before I even knew I had ADHD, right, back when I used to work with kids with ADHD and autism and things of that nature, right, they're all kind of similar. They present themselves with similar challenges and behaviours, ADHD, autism, OCD, etc. And I even said at the time to the woman who was the boss there at the time, the manager, I even said to her, I feel like people with ADHD and autism, etc., it's almost like they are what society calls ADHD and autism or whatever. It's almost like they are in harmony with like a frequency. They are living within a certain frequency, and they are that is different to the norm. They like understand certain things, you know. And many people say that people with ADHD and autism, or both, are like tend to be more emotionally intelligent and kinder in some respects. Now, some people would think that's the antithesis of what some people would associate with somebody who has ADHD, who's all over the place, who's being disruptive necessarily. But you know, that's because they don't understand ADHD the way that some people that have ADHD do, or autism, or whatever. And some people believe that people with ADHD are in fact indigo children. And some people think that even people who they wouldn't necessarily categorize as having ADHD are indigo children, and refer to certain human beings as indigo children. And you can research that for yourself, what indigo children are and the way in which the term is used. But the gist of it, I think, is people who are in touch with certain like higher frequencies, you know, who sometimes may have had a past life, who are in touch with that in some respects, and even if they aren't necessarily in touch with that, who have quite a strong personality, have a sense of self, are kind of special, for want of a better term, right? Who you can't ignore, who, like I said before, can predict certain things, who sometimes don't like authority, who are, and the list goes on and on. I'm not really doing that good of a job of articulating indigo children that well, but look that up for yourself with relation to this. Okay. But that's another story for another day, another video about ADHD, with Conor. But I just wanted to add that in there as well. And yeah, there's lots of like things that people should open their mind to, you know, that oftentimes they're closed to, and they only think. But what people oftentimes don't realize is that these aren't their ideas about these things. These ideas, you know, the reason that people are closed-minded to certain spiritual things is because they're like, that's the way they've been indoctrinated to think. Other people have put those ideas in their head, either their family or the society as a whole, their friends, teachers, whoever, has made them think, oh no, that I would put that in this box. That's horseshit. It's like, really? What do you think the fucking imagination is? Before there was such thing as cars, or the computer, or that many people 500 years ago would think was fucking witchcraft, right? If they could see a computer, or if you, even the ability for you to watch this video and listen to it is crazy. That had to come. That was in someone's mind before. That wasn't a real thing. And people thought they were crazy. You know, even the idea of the imagination. What's dreaming? That's a crazy thing that people don't talk about. Imagination is a crazy thing. You know, Joe Rogan espouses ideas like this about imagination. Talks about things like this. You know, the idea of like me thinking about someone. Have you ever fucking thought about someone? And there's no way you think that that's connected, or spiritually, or anything like that, right? And then they ring you, or they text you, or they message you, or you hear something about them, or you bump into them, and you're like thinking, I was just thinking about you, that's weird. What a coincidence. Maybe there's no coincidences. Maybe that's something that we don't understand yet as human beings about how we're all related. You know? Societies around the world used to understand these things more, you know, prior to about 6,000 years ago, because people were connected to the earth, to animals, to nature. They realized we human beings are all one. That's one of the reasons there was far less war and destruction, because they had respect for each other. They realized what they did to one another, particularly Native Americans, they did to themselves, And they did what they did to animals, and they did to the earth and the air, etc. They did to themselves, you know. Anyway, rant over. But yeah, just wanted to talk about spirituality and, you know, different elements to it. Thank you for listening. And as I said before, feel free to subscribe. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, you know, the power of positive energy and love. And with relation to praying again, you know, like I said before, it's like getting in touch with a higher being. But praying is also like sending positive energy out. And it doesn't matter whether it's going to a literal God or not. It's just the idea of a human being praying in that way. You know, that had to come from somewhere. Had to come from a very real part of humans, recognizing that there was some connection to their thoughts and their spirit and their soul, and trying to make things happen. And, you know, the positive energy you feel around people. I talked about the negative energy earlier, when there's someone negative in your life and you feel the energy. You also feel the positive energy from people, you know, that make you laugh, and, you know, the healing energy of love and hugging someone, whether that's a romantic situation, a friend, a family member, or a stranger, whether it's, you know, more sexual or romantic or platonic, whatever. You know, giving someone a hug is healing. It's scientifically proven to be healing. So, you know, explain that science. And obviously science can explain it in some respects, but they can't explain it in other respects. And that in and of itself should really show us that there is something greater than ourselves, than just science and rationality. Anyway, that's all I wanted to add to that.